Welcome to What We Made Possible, the podcast where we explore the power of healing and driving change for advocates, leaders, and changemakers. The conversations here draw the connection between creating new possibilities in the world, possibilities of care, of belonging, of thriving for our communities, with stories of personal healing and loving relationship building. I'm your host, Patty Dayleg, leadership coach for social change. I spent a decade in nonprofits, government, and DEI, securing 6- and 7-figure opportunities for communities of color. And I've experienced firsthand the transformative power of compassion, healing, and belonging in making a bigger impact. Let's dive in. Hey friends, welcome back. Today, we're getting into something that I've been sitting with for a while now, which is how leadership needs to evolve in 2025 in real, tangible practice. We're living in a time of rapid change, right? Politically, socially, economically. It's an unraveling. Top-down authority, extreme rule, creeping fascism, they're already shaping policy and daily life. And while immigrants and Indigenous and Black communities have been resisting this kind of power for generations, especially in the US, we're now seeing it hit the dominant culture too, right? We're seeing it hit universities. We're seeing it hit corporations who are bowing in advance, bending the knee in advance. We've got tech billionaires like Elon Musk claiming that the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. And I want to be loud and clear that I reject that, right? Empathy is not a weakness. Empathy is how we lead with integrity. It's how we build trust. It's how we move through conflict. And we stay human, right, in systems that try to strip that away. And so the leaders who are going to thrive in 2025 are not the ones clinging to control. They're the ones who can adapt, share power, and actually care for their people. Yeah, in mission statements, yes, in your public speeches and your communications, but most importantly, every day, the way that we show up. And right now, with so much uncertainty in the political and funding landscape, especially for nonprofits and social impact organizations, the way we lead can either help us navigate these changes or make them even harder. I'm going to say that again. The way we lead, especially for nonprofits and social impact organizations, can either help us navigate these changes or make them even harder. And as I was preparing for this episode, I looked to a resource from the Building Movement Project, their FAQ on nonprofits and the current political landscape. It outlines some of the biggest challenges that nonprofits are facing right now, and I wanted to weave those into our conversation today. So in this episode, I'm breaking down 5 leadership shifts we absolutely need this year, right now. And for each one, I'll share the challenge that we're up against, a coaching story from how it plays out in my practice, and what you can do to lead in a way that's resilient and transformative. So let's get into it. So the first shift that we need is from certainty to adaptability. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? Funding is a mess right now. Federal dollars are being rerouted, they're being cut altogether. Long-standing grant programs are suddenly unstable, disappearing. There's whole public health offices just being eliminated. This is, yes, a budgeting issue, but for some folks, this means cutting staff. And for others, it means risking service interruptions in the communities who need them more than ever. In a landscape this unpredictable, trying to stick to rigid plans is a fast track to burnout. So here's the shift, right? Adaptability isn't just a nice to have, it's a core leadership skill, right? Leaders who are grounded in their values but flexible in their methods are the ones steering their organizations through chaos without losing their people. That means scenario planning, real time decision making, being brave enough to say, we need to pivot, and actually carrying out that pivot while bringing your people along. So, one of my clients was following this 5-year strategic plan when a major funder pulled out without warning, right? At first, she froze. She felt like she had almost failed by not sticking to the plan, but the external circumstance shifted a lot, right? So, if the external circumstance is shifting, we cannot assume that our plan is still going to work. So, by sticking to the plan, that is what sets you up for failure. Whereas adaptability says, if we do not pivot, then we fail. If we are able to pivot, then we can move forward. So through coaching, we realized that the plan wasn't the point, right? The plan was not the point for the work. The people were, the impact was. So she brought her team together. They named the uncertainty. They started asking, what's actually needed now? What do we need right now? They structured their programs to be more community-led, financially resilient, and ended up being less dependent on any one single funder. That was not failure, right? That was leadership. So if you're looking at your strategic plan like a contract, then these next several years, and I'm sure it's already been like in the past, 8 weeks of this administration, maybe more. If you're looking at it as a contract, then it's not going to work, right? We need to use our strategic plans like a compass, not a cage. The next thing that you can do is to bring your team into the uncertainty. Do not wait until you have the answers. You co-create them. Because here's what happens. When your team finds out that funding is not happening, they will also start to freak out. And they start to ask, what do I need to do, right? Your team is already leaning into that flexibility. They're already trying to figure out what to do with this uncertainty. They're going to adapt, regardless of whether you bring them along, whether that means they leave you and go somewhere else, or they stay with you because you're co-creating them. That makes the difference. So if you wait and try to say like, oh, we don't have an answer for you, just hold on, people are going to move forward because they need their safety too, right? They need to adapt too. They need their paycheck too. And so if you are able to bring your team into that uncertainty and say, for example, in this example of a funder pulling out, right? You say, this is what we are committed to. If our funding goes X way, then this is how we are going to move. If it moves this way, this is how we're going to move. You do that scenario planning with them so that they know that you are thinking about them, right? Normalize scenario planning. Normalize what if thinking, because your people want to know that you have their back and that it's not just that you have them because you need them to fulfill a contract, right? And then the last piece, which is, I know, so difficult to do, but so important right now, is to get proactive about building resources, alternative revenue streams, and scenario models, right? Future you will thank you. Even if you're building towards that reserve, even if you can't put away, 3 months right now worth of reserves, 6 months of reserves right now, 1 year of reserves right now. If that's not possible for you, what is 1 week, 2 weeks? What can we cut? What can we do? What models work for us? Because that extra little cushion not only gives us financial cushion, but also emotional and mental. All right, here's the second shift from individualism to collective power. And maybe it's a remembering, maybe it's a shift back, maybe it's an integration rather than a shift into something that's new. Or maybe it's a deepening for you, right? From individualism to collective power. So here's what's happening, right? Organizations doing racial justice, climate work, equity based organizing are under attack. If you're doing community based work and it has been federally funded, or there was some kind of pass through that originated in the federal government, sometimes that is also considered DEI for folks who don't understand. And so you're still under attack, even if you're not doing quote unquote DEI work, but you're doing racially kind of focused work. And that attack is not just ideological, it's financial, first and foremost, right? The current political machine is targeting these orgs. And many are feeling isolated, overwhelmed, unsure how to hold it all together. And so the antidote, right, the shift to that is collective power. And that's why you started this whole work in the first place. Like, right, that's why you got into this work, because you weren't meant to do this alone. So leadership in 2025, especially for our communities, is about interdependence, building coalitions, sharing resources, recognizing that being in community makes us stronger and not weaker. So let me share with you this coaching story for a client who was leading an advocacy organization under a ton of political pressure. She was shielding her team, she was absorbing all the stress, and she was burning out fast. And she was already working in coalition, right? It's not like she didn't have shared leadership, but in this pressure for many women of color, for many daughters of immigrants, for folks with marginalized identities, we tend to, under pressure, shrink and isolate. And so for her, she felt like all the pressure was on herself. And so in coaching, we reframed leadership as collective, and she started making decisions with her team, not for her team. She leaned into peers, other executives at other organizations. She leaned into the coalition she was part of. And the shift was palpable. She felt held, and in being held, her org became more sustainable. So here's what you can practice. One is name when and where you're isolating yourself. When you do that, right, ask yourself, whose wisdom are you missing? In what ways are you trying to just figure it out on your own when you don't need to? Who else can you pull in, and whose wisdom are you missing? Second thing you can practice, map your ecosystem, right? Who is in your corner? Who are your peer orgs? Who are your allies? Who are your funders? And where can you build and rebuild and deepen intentional connection? Not just for the sake of whatever end, right? Not just for more dollars, not just for a sign-on letter, but for the relationship itself. And then the third piece that you can practice around building collective power is internally in your org, normalizing shared leadership in your org, right? It's not about ego, it's about longevity. Not ego, it's longevity. So how can we share leadership inside your org? How can you share decision making? What does it look like for the pressure to not fall on just one person? Here's a third shift, from authority to trust. The challenge is that many leaders are stuck in performance mode, trying to look like they've got it all figured out. And then when you are pretending like you've got it all figured out, you're setting up the expectation that your team has to have it all figured out, right? And that facade creates a disconnection. Staff can feel it, funders can feel it, your partners can feel it. And in times like these, the last thing we need is false confidence. We do not need false confidence. We have enough of that at the federal level. We need truth, right? And so the shift is shifting into building trust. Trust does not mean, trust me, I'm in charge. That's not what that means. It means you can trust that I'll be honest with you, even when things are hard. Because leaders who build with transparency build safety, they build loyalty, they build buy-in. It takes longer, right? But you can solve problems together rather than pretending nothing's wrong or being in like the blame game. Because when you are in performance mode and then there's a mistake, what happens, right? It becomes about shame and, oh, I just didn't do it right, versus how can we problem solve and how can we move forward? So I had a client who had just stepped into an executive role. She just stepped up into leadership, and she felt pressure to prove that she was, quote unquote, the right choice. So she avoided showing any uncertainty. And the result was that her team felt shut out. And when she was up managing, it was hard to problem solve. So once she started being transparent, naming challenges, asking questions, inviting feedback, everything shifted. Morale went up, solutions got better. She didn't lose authority, she gained trust. And even in the planning process, right? One of my frameworks that I share a lot with folks who are stepping into management for the first time is around compassionate planning. Understanding how much time does each player need? How much does each person in your timeline need in order to do the thing that you need them to do? So for example, if I'm in the middle of a rebrand, right? And one of the deadlines to review my website when it's up is while I'm on vacation. And so I asked if I could either have that deadline be moved up so that they stay on timeline, like get it to me early, and I need this amount of time in order to review it, or get it to me after I'm back and I'll look at it after I'm back. But regardless, I'm going to need X amount of time. So the compassionate piece is understanding that we are human, right? We are not robots in this work. Sometimes a 24-hour turnaround is too tight. It's too tight, especially when it hasn't been communicated in advance, right? Like it's hard to make these moves when you're not taking into account the humans who are behind the moves. And when you need them in order to do something, when you need someone else in order to move forward yourself, right? And so that transparency of naming the challenge, of naming the timelines that are realistic, that is part of not moving from authority, right? Like giving random deadlines, that's not what's happening in my example, but I've seen it so many times, giving a deadline because you just think that that's what you need without having spoken to anyone, just because like that's your fake deadline. People hate that shit. So how can we shift from quote unquote, trust me, I'm in charge, to trust me that I'll be honest with you even when things are hard and I got you, right? So here's what you can practice. 1, share more than the wins. Share the why, the how, and what was hard, and all of the pieces behind the wins, right? 2nd, build feedback loops that are not performative. Ask for input, act on it, create timelines that are compassionate, that take into account other people's calendars and your own. And then 3rd is to model vulnerability. Say, I don't know. If you don't know, say, I don't know. And then lead the search for the answers. Like, let it be okay that you don't know. Here's the 4th shift. From perfectionism to experimentation. Now, as a former perfectionist, as a healing perfectionist, as the first daughter of our first daughter of immigrants, right? I had trouble with this. And so do others. A lot of people that I work with really need things to be perfect in order to move on. But the shift that we need is from perfectionism to experimentation. Okay, for us perfectionists, I have to be real, we don't have the luxury of perfection right now. Trying to get it just right, quote unquote, is keeping leaders, keeping organizations from innovating when they need it most. Again, it's looking at your old standard as a contract when that contract, the terms just don't make sense, right? It's not about being excellent. That's not what perfectionism is about, right? It's about fear. I forget who said it, but perfectionism is just fear in a nice skirt. It keeps us stuck. So, what we actually need in 2025 is leadership that is experimental by nature, right? It's iterative, it's messy, it's about being brave and taking and making strategic bets and learning as you go. The leaders who try new things quickly, thoughtfully, with intention are the ones moving their orgs forward. So I had one client who was watching participation drop in her long-standing program, and she was scared to change it, right? What if I make things worse? But she gave permission to test a small, low-risk pilot. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. And participation went back up. It grew. And her team felt re-energized, right? That's a shift in how we do things. Very often, and I've been this person saying, very often, and I've been this person, we say, oh, we've never done that before, or we've never done it in that way before. We've always done it this way. And I've been that person. I've been that person who'd be like, oh, that's not a thing. Like, that's not how we do things. But that's not what we need right now. What we need is what actually is the new thing that we can do. So here's what you can practice. One is pilot before you pivot. Pilot before you pivot. Small tests lower the stakes and they reveal what works, right? So in what ways can you, when you make a shift, how can you do a small test first? Next is that you can celebrate learning, not just outcomes, right? Talk about what the experiment taught you. And then third is to name perfectionism when it shows up. Like I said, it's usually fear in a really cute outfit. It's trying to do all the things. There's really great intentions for it. Because perfectionism, if something is perfect, then we're safe, right? Then we've done the thing that we needed to do. But that's not the case anymore. So name it when it shows up and call it out. Okay, here's the last shift from productivity to well-being. Burnout is very real right now. People are exhausted from their workload, from grief, from rage, from living in systems that weren't built for them, from seeing the news and seeing that their communities are not safe. And leaders are trying to figure out, do we even shift our whole strategic plan to pivot to this? Or do our communities need us to double down? And that alone is a ton of work. That question alone is a ton of work. So pushing for productivity without tending to well-being is a recipe for collapse. And leaders are often modeling the very behaviors that lead to it because of the pressure. So here's how we shift. I want to name that well-being is not self-indulgent. It's strategic, right? A rested, resourced team is a powerful one. I think it was Audre Lorde who said, caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It's self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. This is especially the case for folks working in mission-based work, in nonprofit, right? When you take care of yourself, when you're rested, when you're resourced, you're more powerful, right? A leader who sets boundaries gives everyone else permission to do the same. And so in 2025, we need to model balance and not burn out. I feel like millennials can learn from Gen Z a lot from this. So I'll tell you a story. One of my coaching clients was leading an org with a team that was deeply committed, but everyone was on edge. She thought leadership meant being the first one in, last one out. But when we coached together, she learned to rest on purpose. She created boundaries. She took actual breaks. And she encouraged her team to do the same. She normalized the team doing the same. And guess what? Retention improved, impact increased. Nobody had to sacrifice themselves to get there, to do what they needed to do. So these are the practices that you can try, is what I did with her. 1, audit your calendar, right? What's fueling you? What's draining you? And that doesn't mean the things that are draining you, you just don't do them. That's not what that means. It means, how can you resource yourself? How can you rest? How can you give yourself what you need? How can you create an ambiance within your space that allows you to feel better as you're doing this thing? Because if it's draining you, but it's something that is still necessary for the movement, for your work, for things to move forward, even if it's like a task that doesn't feel good, what can you do so that you feel good before and after, maybe even during? So practice auditing your calendar. Ask yourself these questions. Next, we talk a lot about boundaries in our collective today. I feel like boundaries are all over my social media, but set them, right? Honor them out loud. And then the last is to make rest and joy part of your culture, part of your collective culture. It's not just a perk, right? It's not just let me give you this membership to this meditation app. That's important, but it has to be part of the culture, not this like kind of tech industry approach or like corporate approach of, well, we're going to give you these perks so that you can keep going, not just for that, right? Like making rest and joy part of the culture, not just perks. So in closing, these 5 shifts are not just about being a better leader, right? They're not just about doing the things that you need to do. They're about, how can you build that better world that when you got into this work, how can you actually do that thing, even within today's circumstances? So I'll ask you, what shifts feel most urgent for you right now? Maybe it's dropping the need to have all the answers. Maybe it's pausing long enough to actually feel your own exhaustion. Maybe it's letting your people in, letting them really in. And speaking of letting people in, I want to name that I am in a different place today and my dog is with me and he is very uncomfortable. So you might have heard him just walking around, and I hope you forgive me for that audio if you did hear him. And so coming back to this, right, whatever it is, you're not leading alone and you don't have to be perfect in order to be powerful. So DM me, share this episode with your leadership team, reach out if you want support bringing this kind of leadership into your work. I'm here for it and I'm here for you. I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you for listening to What We Made Possible. I really hope this episode resonated. As a coach, I always end with action steps, and so I invite you to do something, which is to pause and ask yourself, what resonated? What am I taking away? And what's possible for me and my community now? If you liked this conversation, please leave a review and a rating. It helps so much. Thanks again.